On August the 25th, 2000, a team of Royal Irish soldiers were taken hostage by the West Side Boys in Sierra Leone. My name's Big Phil Campion. At that time, I was D Squadron 22 SAS. The action that ensued was called Operation Barras, and our mission was to go and get them back. Throughout 1990, a brutal civil war engulfed Sierra Leone. You ended up with a faction called the West Side Boys. Now, the West Side Boys were a rebel gang who now occupied what was known as inside the horseshoe. It was almost a no-go area. Government troops didn't go in there, they didn't come out. So the British was there just really to keep an eye on things and give them a bit of assurance that things weren't that bad. The West Side Boys weren't going to overrun them, and if they tried, the Brits would step in and help them out. On the 25th of August, a patrol of Royal Irish who were working for the United Nations were on a routine patrol. Whilst returning to camp, the officer commanding the patrol decided that he'd disappear up towards a place called McBenney. And McBenney was an enemy stronghold. Now, within about 5 or 6 minutes of them disappearing up this road, they hit a roadblock. A roadblock of, 20, 30 of these militia, all right? Who put a truck across the road and stopped them from getting any further. As they went to turn around to see if they could get away, another truck trundled down the track, boom. Almost straight away, they were bundled into line, bagged and tagged, hooded up, and led off into the jungle. Put into a dugout canoe, taken across the river, and they found themselves in Barras. A massive part of this mission was understanding who we were up against, and we were up against the West Side Boys. Here's their leader here, a guy called Fode Calais. Now, Fode Calais had taken some British training. He'd also been fighting. He was well-blooded, well-experienced, and wasn't afraid to chop a few people up now and again. He really was a nasty piece of work. But as you can see on this photograph here, some of them are quite young. Some of them are extremely young. Children. There's children in there. It put a completely different tinge on what we were doing. The temperament of them is very, very difficult to gauge how they're going to be, what condition they're going to be in, and moreover, what are they likely to do if they get a sniff of things going wrong. We were still under no illusion that they were going to keep these troops and use them as a bartering tool for something. They wanted something out of it. They weren't just going to hand these people back, they wanted something for them. We didn't know what, and that was for the negotiators who are well trained to keep that plate spinning while we do everything we can in our power to try and get them back and resolve this mission. Let's have a butcher's at where we were, all right? Because it wasn't just down the road, was it? We was in West Africa. Quite a way down into West Africa as well. So, I've got a map here. Let's get it the right way around, shall we? Okay, West Africa, there we go. Sierra Leone then, Freetown. That's the capital of Sierra Leone, that's there, okay? Freetown. Both sides of the river there, Lundy Airport's on this and Freetown's on that side. The horseshoe then roughly goes around this sort of like area here, okay, and is cut off around there, and sort of like this area here is a no-go area for anybody. That's what made this more difficult. It was quite unknown in there. Nobody had been in there, and it was occupied by rebels. The Rockall Creek, or the river that we were following, there you go, you can see that all the way up here, and Barras is probably somewhere around there. The area in more detail then, because that thing really isn't too exciting. If we say that this is the river, okay, so that's the river, all right, running through, two little islands in it. This side then is Barras, we'll put GB, Barras, all right. This is where our people are, this is where our hostages are being held. On this side of the river then, Fodugu and McBenney, there's more rebels on this side. So on this side, we were guesstimating possibly anywhere up to 300 to 400, 300 to 400, and on this side, hopefully about 250, all right? That's what we're thinking. Surrounding this then, in these areas here, dense jungle, proper dense jungle. You're not running through that, right? That's really dense jungle. There was a big white house in the middle of this place here, and then there was a number of other dwellings which weren't quite so big. A football pitch, which was somewhere up here. On another side of the coin, from a soldiering point of view, if you've never been to the jungle, you probably wouldn't understand, but the jungle's a place where it's extremely hot, it's extremely humid. It will probably rain torrentially at least once a day. If that doesn't get you, there's all sorts of creepy crawlies, bugs, and God knows what hiding in the bushes. It all wants you dead. Everything in the jungle wants you dead, including the people that live there. All right, so it's an extremely challenging environment. And to soldier in, and that's the reason the SAS conduct their selection process in the jungle. The main part of selection is in the jungle because it is such a phenomenally hard place to soldier. But if you can soldier in the jungle, you can soldier anywhere on the planet. Let's take the mission back to the 25th of August. Where was I? Well, I was in Kenya, all right? I was having a great time. We were over there, we were doing some troop training. So that for me, when I was mountain troop, we were going to climb a mountain. I was looking forward to it. It was going to be a bit of a laugh. Now, we got the shout on a communications schedule in the evening, get yourself back to camp, there's something going off. Not unusual to get that, not unusual at all. It happens all the time. We got back early evening. Boat troop were on their way back. They had a longer drive. They had about a 12-hour drive. On the way back, they had an accident. They had a road traffic accident. In that accident, 2 guys were killed. So this operation, before it had even gone anywhere for us, had cost us 2 lives. And that was the way that, certainly I viewed it. The rest of the squadron, I think, probably viewed it that way as well. We had already lost 2 guys. We did move down to Sierra Leone, and we were taken from there and on out to a camp which was further out of town that we could base from while we were getting ready for this. The only plans we could come up with was we can go down the river and we can assault this place first thing in the morning. But the chances of getting down that river, you've seen it on the map how squiggly it is. The chances of getting down there without being seen by a local who then gets on the jungle drums and alerts them that we're coming and we'll just turn up to some dead bodies or turn up to nobody in the village, that's quite high. So the bonkers one was, well, why don't we just fly into the village, jump off the helicopter, kick the shit out of them, and we'll have it that way. And it was one of those things whereby if it had been a promotion course in the military and you'd have come up with that plan, you'd have got sent home. Do you know what I mean? But this was the only plan that we had. And it was at this point that it started becoming known as Operation Certain Death because it was bonkers. It was absolutely bonkers. And I remember when they sort of like came back to us and said, yeah, it's a go, that plan, thinking to myself, well, but that's what we've got to run with. And that really was a sort of like who dares wins moment where you suddenly realise that you haven't got the deck of cards that you wanted. In life sometimes I think for me, if you get dealt a shit sandwich that you've got to eat, we'll just get some ketchup on it and get the fucker down, do you know what I mean? Because it's not going to go away, is it? Right, let's talk one of my favourites, kit and equipment, all right? I'm not a spotter, by the way, all right, but I do like a bit of kit and equipment. And on this mission in particular, we needed to get this right because this was one of the things that we controlled. So, airframes, we needed airframes. I've mentioned airframes. But these were going to be key. The 2 that we were travelling in, the CH-47s, were going to be key. They carry, believe it or not, a lot of firepower on these. And this firepower was going to be critical to this mission. That when these things got into place, to save themselves more than anything, they needed to make sure that their guns were working properly, right? They needed to make sure that when these things were hovering, just above an enemy stronghold, if the enemy were trying to shoot them down, they needed to be flat packing people big time with these stuff. We had the Lynxes. They too had door gunners with them, so they could provide fire support for these guys as well. Okay, so there's a lot of firepower coming in the sky initially. Individually then, let's have a look. What did we have? What did we have? Everything at our disposal. Everything that you could get hold of, you had. Typically, you were either going to be carrying an M4 at the time, maybe with an underslung 203 with a grenade launcher on it. Okay, that's going to be your personal weapon. Or a Minimi, a small lightweight machine gun, airborne stock on it so that it can be slung in the helicopter, not take too much room. It's got a shorter barrel, etc. So that was my preferred thing, and that's what I had. I had one of those. Okay, so that's what I'm carrying, but I'm also carrying a backup because I know if this thing gets knocked out of my hands, if I run out of ammo, if it goes on for longer than possible, well, I might just need myself a pistol. I think this is clear. There you go, that's clear. Okay. There you go. So every man, Jack, has got himself a pistol. Every guy's carrying things like grenades, rocket launchers. I've got one. Here's one I prepared earlier. So there you go. That is a 66mm rocket launcher. It's even got the instructions on the side of it here. There you go, the instructions. So in case you were absolutely stupid, you could still use it, all right? So that's a nice thing to have. Let's have a quick breakdown of it then. That's the end where the rocket's stored. This is the end where it's coming out. Don't confuse them because you'll fuck things right up, okay? This thing here is the safety catch and this is the trigger. Contained within it are 2 sights, all right? Now, you pull the safety out, you flick that down, you whack it open, all right? You stick it on your shoulder like so, all right? You pull out the safety, you find out who you want to shoot it at, all right? I can see the crew ducking and all that sort of kick right here, all right? And then, boom, Bob's your uncle, Robert's your father's brother, and someone's had a great day. Let's have a look at how this mission was going to plan out as far as the teams were concerned. And for that, I'm going to tell you the rough plan of how we thought things were going to go. Right, so 2 sides of the river. Let's deal with the parachute regiment first, okay? They were going to get called in after the main assault had gone in on the other side, and purely because we didn't have enough airframes to dump everybody off at the same time. So they were literally going to form up in their own teams and clear literally from building to building and pepper pot their way forward through the village, and that was them done. There was a main drag went through, and they were literally going to clear up both sides, fan out, boom, off they go. On the regiment side then, on the Operation Barras side of things, obviously the main effort of this whole operation stroke mission is to rescue the hostages. So that had to be one of the priorities when thinking of how we were going to do it. And we needed a team in on that house as quickly as was humanly possible. Now, the only way to drop them on there guaranteed was to fly the helicopter in and almost put a rope straight down to the front door so they could go bump and straight in. They would be covered, A, by the gunners on the helicopter, but B, by the observation team who were already in the bushes who now could move forward, and anybody in and around the area could be dealt with whilst this team were going straight in. That was one end of the village. Literally, they were going to be falling out of the helicopter as quickly as they could on ropes into the village, boom, deal with the targets they've been given, and then go firm. Simultaneously to that happening, another helicopter was going to fly in. He was going to turn onto the football pitch and the troops were going to come out the back. Some were going over this way, some were going over that way, okay? They were going to fight across the football pitch, and there was various buildings around here that needed clearing by those troops there. So this helicopter was going to touch wheels down onto the football pitch. The troops were going to come out as quickly as they could. And I remember I made a pact with one of my friends, you know, if this goes completely wrong and you see me getting dragged off into the bush to be used as an ashtray for the next 6 months before they finally execute me by pulling my testicles over my head and smashing me face in with a rifle butt, can you shoot me, please? Do you know what I mean? Can you just drop me? Because I don't want that. Do you know what I mean? So, that's the sort of level of friendship you're talking. So finally, a green light was given, and it was given from the Prime Minister down. So we now know that we're going to go. A negotiation was to be held between the West Side boys and the negotiating team the day before the troops were going to go in. Now, on this negotiation, it was decided we'd let them have something to give them a good feeling. Let them have that fuzzy feeling that they were winning and let them go back to the camp happy so that they weren't on edge and they weren't ready for us when we came. So to that end, they'd been asking and pestering for 2 boat engines. Well, we thought, fuck it, we've got 2 boats and we've got 2 engines. And actually, we'll get them back when we're finished anyway. So there you go, lads. Have the 2 boat engines. Oh, and as a gesture of goodwill, have these 50 cases of lager as well. Because we knew they'd take those 50 cases of lager back to the village and they'd drink them. So that's what we did. We sent them back to the village with a load of lager and 2 boat engines. So the night before, while the squadron was having its final set of orders, the West Side boys were on the Schwally. So that's the way things were going to go down. They're on the Swally. We're getting ready. We had the final set of orders. Now, everybody with any responsibility whatsoever was in on that set of orders, which was going to be delivered by the squadron commander. Before you know it, you've got a full room full of absolutely everybody who's got anything to do with that mission on the day. Doctors, nurses, ship's captains, helicopter pilots, the sick, the lame, the lazy, the bottle washers, the whole lot. They're all in there, right? Everybody's in there. And everybody's looking front centre to the OC, who is delivering a detailed set of orders covering everybody's actions, every eventuality, and exactly what's got to happen, when, where, how, and moreover, what happens if things go wrong. So you've had your set of orders. This was done probably a couple of hours before last light, because immediately as you finished your sets of orders, we moved into the field that was marked out as the village and we held rehearsals. You rehearsed absolutely everything until you were happy with it, to the letter, all right? And then you've rehearsed everything that could go wrong. So you were happy with that, to the letter. Rehearse, 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 rehearse. And in between times, get your kit ready. Clean your kit. Make sure everything's working. Make sure you've got everything. Make sure that absolutely nothing is left to chance. In between those last rehearsals being done, which went on into sort of like after last light, there was a period of time where you could go and get your head down, go to sleep. And I found it extremely difficult to go to sleep that night. I tried and I couldn't, I had too much on my mind. One of the things that was bugging me actually was it was my son's birthday on the 10th, and the 10th was the day that we were actually fighting. And I thought the irony of dying on your son's birthday was, it just flicked something in my own mind that said, you know, it could be you tomorrow. And it just unsettled me a little bit, as it were. It wasn't, it wasn't a massive thing, but it was just another matchstick on the pile, like, as it were, do you know what I mean? And then before we loaded onto helicopters, I remember one of the sergeant majors giving like a rousing speech. Before we got on the helicopter, you could hear the helicopters winding up, the noise of the engines, the whining of the turbines starting and all that sort of stuff. And it was crazy sound. Onto the helicopters, and everybody's ready, and the helicopters take off, boom, and they don't hang around, they're up and they're out over Freetown. And then we're in a holding pattern. The two Chinooks, the two CH-47s, a figure of 8, backed and flanked by the two Lynxes, and we're in a holding pattern, well out to sea, well up in the air, probably about 20 odd grand, so that we can't be heard by anybody, and we're just sat there now waiting for the OBS teams to turn around and go, right, you're ready to go. And we got over our earpieces, 0 Alpha has control, stand by. And as that second standby came in, I see the loadmaster giving the thumbs up, and the helicopters just dropped down into a formation where they could get as close as they could to the sea and absolutely smash it into the jungle below the like tree level and round this crazy course on up to target. And I remember in amongst all this chaos in the back of the helicopter, just to sort of like, you could see through the hue of this red light so that it didn't damage your eyesight for when you got off the helicopter. You had a half eye on the loadmaster, who was going to be ultimately the guy who was going to tell you, 30 seconds out, and then was going to be telling you, red on, green on, go. I remember there was a shout down from the front, and he's yelling 2 minutes, and he's got his hand up right, and he's going 2 minutes. And I'm still bouncing about at this stage of the campaign, and I suddenly think to myself, fucking hell, this might be my last 2 minutes on the planet. The whole helicopter must have been thinking the same thing, because the thing just went poof. Silence in the back of the helicopter, from guys geeing each other up. All of a sudden, the steely eyes went on, and people are now switched on. They know within inside 2 minutes, they're going to be coming out of the back of this helicopter into the mother of all punch-ups. So as we came round the last sort of like bend as we were coming in, the helicopter starts to flare. I remember seeing a great big flash down the side of the helicopter, and then you could hear the chain guns almost engaging straight away. Over the noise of the helicopter's blades, which were turning, people screaming now, 30 seconds, red on, and before you knew it, the back of the helicopter had touched down on the ground, and we were off, and we were out, and we were charging. Now, the plan had been, he'd come out, back of the helicopter, he'd go there. He'd come out, he'd go there. He'd go there. He'd come out, he'd go there. So we'd peel in, and eventually we would end up like this. This wasn't going to take very long at all, okay? So you'd end up in a straight line facing across the football pitch, and our first target was probably here, okay? So there we go. That's our first target, is probably here, all right? And these guys have got one here, and I've got one here, and there's a series of buildings. And then the plan was, this is going to take off once he knows we're all down. That's going to disappear out the way, and we're just going to fight across there. They'll probably move, they'll move, and we'll just cover each other as we go across the football pitch fighting, okay? Job's a good one. However, helicopter touches down, all right? First guy comes out, and instead of facing that way, faces this way. I'm like, fuck, what's he done that for? So I go there, another bloke goes there, a couple of these switch on and go, right, we need to go over here, and before you know it, we're like a bugger's muddle at the back of the helicopter thinking, what the fuck are we doing? And we're facing the wrong fucking way. And I'm like, but there is activity going on here, and there are targets that need engaging, and the helicopter's sort of like concentrated its efforts this way because the observation team had been here. He didn't want to blue on blue. He didn't want to be killing people he shouldn't be. But the fact was we were taking incoming from here, and we needed to deal with it, so we fucking did. So this disappeared, bang, and now we're facing the wrong fucking way. I'm like, what do we do about this? And the commander literally sort of looked up and went, wait lads, we're facing the wrong way. And we done this bizarre thing when he went, right, you lot move first and we'll cover you. So they sort of like got up, turned around, got back down. And then we sort of like did this bizarre move where we all sort of like under the cover of each other ended up facing this way. Off we went again. These two fighting like this to their building, us fighting like this, okay, to our building. There's rounds going absolutely fucking everywhere. There's chaos. There's absolute screaming, shouting. There's people shooting at us from here. There's people who've shot at us from there. The whole thing has gone completely fucking Pete Tong, right? So Halfway across the football pitch, boom, flash, bang. What the fuck's that? I feels it in my arm. One of the patrol members in our patrol is screaming, I've been hit, but he's okay, all right? But he's going, I'm gonna have to stay here for a bit, which unnerved me a little bit. I'm thinking, fuck me, it must be worse than what we think, but he didn't want to seem like it was worse than what he thinks, because that's the patrol commander. So he's going, carry on lads, I'll catch you up, like, do you know what I mean? We're going, that must be bad. But we'd been told, you can't stay in this area now and go and look after him. So he's going to have to look after himself until everything's clear, because you can imagine what can happen here. I'll go back to see if he's okay, and then he goes back to join me. If I'm, before you know it, we're all in the shit, aren't we? So literally, had to leave him there, carry on with what we was doing, fight on through, clear the buildings as to plan. Then we can start thinking about the guys that have been injured. There's still scrapping going on all over the place, because you can hear it. You're not sure exactly what's going on, but I knew that what was in front of me was clear, and that now we had to face into the jungle in case they decided to reorganise and come back and give us another go. You're now waiting for the various teams, patrols, to say that they're in a similar situation to us, where they're all happy. And I remember the Sergeant Major was visiting people to just make sure that everybody was where they should be. And as he came past me, he kicked me and said, you might as well get a cup of tea on. I think they know we're here by now. So I decided, right, fuck it, I'll get a cup of tea on the go. So I crawled into this little foxhole, right? This little depression in the ground. I had this thing, this system in my own mind where, because I had a weapon that was on a bipod, I could stick that into my shoulder and I could make a cup of tea one-handed. As I'm drinking my cup of tea, my mate starts kicking my leg. As I look over to him, he goes like this and points in that direction. More enemy. And what the enemy had done was, where we'd gone sort of like fairly silent, and where people were now just sort of like conducting their business without making any noise, the enemy must have thought, oh good, they've fucked off now, we'll come back in. And there's a group of them getting ready to come back in, and my mate's seen them. I draw my weapon properly into my shoulder, and it is possible to fire these things one-handed, right? Keep my cup of tea on the go. And as they come to within a manageable distance, obviously we let them have the good news and let them know that we're still here. So we deal with the situation as it was. We then get this sort of like to-ing and fro-ing for quite some time, where people try and get back into the village and they're repelled, and it goes on for quite some time. So you can hear, various little scuffles going on around the village. And I don't know how long that went on for, but eventually the mortar tube got going and we sort of like just mortared into the various pockets of where we thought the enemy were. Bum, 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 bum. And then this helicopter turned up, right? This helicopter turned up, this big white beast from Russia with the great big bazookas on the side of it. And I'm like, fucking hell, here he comes. And I remember my patrol commander said, right, we're going to flatten an area in front of us first. We're going to give it the good news in front of us, because that's where the majority of the stuff was coming from. So he says to me, have you got a smoke? Not a smoke, but a smoke grenade. So I pulls out an orange smoke. Yeah, I've got one. He said, right, just hoon it over there. He said, and that will be the marker for the helicopter so that he knows where we are and he doesn't fire at us, he goes past that. So I lob this smoke, down it goes, boom, rolls along the thing, orange smoke everywhere. And before it's built up into a massive cloud, there's this almighty crack and thump. Boom, 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 like fucking hell, as these missiles come whanging over the top of us. And you can hear branches from trees just dissipating all over the place. Concurrently, the team have already got hold of the hostages and they're already secure. So they burst through straight into the room. They've secured them. The look of relief on them and the look of, wow, we're actually going out of here. Because there must have been so many times they'd been under mock executions, they'd been told this, they'd been told that, they'd been taken to the limit countlessly by the West Side boys. They'd been taunted, they'd been spat on, they'd been, treated worse than dogs. So the helicopters are now ferrying in and out, dragging people off. First to go were obviously the hostages, get them out of there. Then there's a helicopter full of enemy dead, get pulled out of there. Then there's, I don't know what order they were, but I was fairly low down on the pecking order to get out of there as we were sort of like holding the perimeter, and then everybody collapsed and the last helicopter would have taken off. I wasn't on the last one, but there was enemy weapons to be taken out of there and disposed of and all that sort of stuff. So the whole operation of getting everybody back, I don't even know how long it took. But it took a fair amount of time. It wasn't something that was over within 5 minutes. And then that was it, it was done. You're back in camp. Scratching your nuts in your underpants going, what the fuck happened there? Like, do you know what I mean? It was absolutely bonkers. Do you know what I mean? So, various people had been off on the hospital ship. We now knew that, we knew when we were on the ground fairly early that we'd lost a guy on the ground. Unfortunately, tragically, Brad was killed. We knew that while we were out there, but when we got back in, there were various other people who had been carted off to the hospital ship. They were all thankfully okay. There was a few walking wounded. Myself, I didn't even think about the hole in my arm. We went and spent the night on an RFA ship, a Fleet Auxiliary ship, and had a few beers on there. And before you knew it, and within sort of like less than 24 hours, or it felt less than 24 hours, you're staring down Hard-on Hill. Hard-on Hill being the last hill before you get home in Hereford that overlooks it. You always get hard on, because you know your missus is coming. In that day, I must have experienced every emotion that I've got and visited a few that I didn't even know that I fucking had, all right? So, if you think about it, nervous doesn't even touch how you felt at some stages while you were thinking about what you had to do. Absolute fucking elation when they finally say you're gonna go. When I found out Brad had been killed, fucking raging when I found out they'd killed one of ours. Relieved when I got off the ground myself and I'm still alive. And we call that being in the Glad to Be Alive club. You're still starry-eyed, but you're like, well, at least I'm out of there. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's crazy. And that's how it was. That's how the mission went. Everybody we went to get from that village came out. Although we didn't all come home ourselves, the mission was to bring those people out of that village, and that's what we did, okay? So that was a successful mission from that point of view. In terms of that, it was a successful operation. Obviously, we had a casualty ourselves, which we needed to bury, and Brad Tinian was a superb soldier. He was also a very good friend of mine, and when I think of the sacrifice that he made, it goes above and beyond what would be expected of anybody in my book. So he was an absolutely superb top guy, and he died doing the job that he loved. Helping to resolve something which was, nothing of his doing, but his duty, his sense of pride, led him, into that situation. So that's Brad, and an extremely top fella. Will always be remembered by myself. Fode Calais was put on trial. He went to prison. As far as hostilities within that region, that fairly much put pay to it. After that, there was nothing really. And I've heard it loads of times before. You get people who say to you, oh, conflict sorts nothing out. Well, it did sort that out. It actually did sort that out. It did. I had a friend of mine visit the village recently, and the children in that village now cut around with pens and paper and not AK-47s. And if that's not a success story, then there never was one. It's absolutely imperative that people understand that the sacrifices that were made on that day by, and the ultimate sacrifice that was made by Brad have paved the way for people to have a better life. And so, I'm extremely proud of that, is what I'm saying. Really, I think my final word will always go to the 3 guys that didn't come home. 2 guys didn't come home from Kenya, and 1 guy didn't come home from Sierra Leone. And that was ultimately the price that we paid.
In April 1980, 6 Arabistani terrorists took over the Iranian embassy in London, capturing 26 hostages. I'm Robin Horsfall. I was part of the 60-man team that raided the building on May the 5th, 1980, and brought 19 people back. Our mission was Operation Nimrod, and this is how we did it.